Welcome to What Matters Now, the Times of Israel's weekly deep dive into one issue facing Israel and the Jewish world. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan, joined by Rav Doron Perez in our Jerusalem office. Hi, Doron.
Hi, Amanda. Nice to be with you.
My pleasure, really. Doron is originally from Johannesburg and since 2014 is the Executive Chairman of the Mizrachi World Movement and a member of the board of the World Zionist Organization. Doron is a rabbi, a Jewish leader, and author, and according to the World Mizrachi website, your major focus is on organizational transformation and invigorating the global religious Zionist movement with its dual focus on Jewish and Zionist identity and destiny. And we'll definitely talk about that. But Doron is also a husband and a father of 4, and one of his sons, Daniel, is a soldier who was killed on October 7th after a heroic battle for the protection of Nachal Oz. The family only learnt of his death in March after his remains had been held hostage for 163 days in Gaza. So we're going to talk about the past almost 8 months and the several moments of terrible announcements as the family learned of their son's fate when we are back. And we're back. Thank you again for joining me today. It is always difficult for an interview to know what is permitted to ask a person who is bereaved. And so I'm just going to ask, and you can answer what you answer.
No problem.
Okay, great. So, Doron, you made Aliyah when you were 18. And when you made Aliyah, did you at all imagine that you would be in the position that you're in today?
No, never. I don't think I really thought about it as an 18-year-old. I've actually made Aliyah twice, which I'll speak about. And the second time was more maybe relevant because I was a father. I'm a father, but then I was a father. So I came first when I was 18, planning actually not yet to make Aliyah to go back to South Africa and study medicine. But 1 year became 2 became 3. And I said, okay, I'm going to stay in Israel. And in fact, my parents, when I was in my 3rd year in yeshiva studies, my parents made Aliyah. So for the last 35 years, almost, we've pretty much been, my family's been in Israel. We then got an offer to go back to South Africa as a young rabbi of the Mizrachi movement. Friends of ours there said, we really need some young, hopefully dynamic, religious Zionist rabbis, modern Orthodox. So I went back to South Africa. What I thought would be a 2-year shlichut with my wife, Shelly, who'd also made Aliyah from South Africa, and our oldest son, Yonatan, who was then 4 months old. That became 15 years. So when we came back 15 years later in 2014 to assume the position at World Mizrachi, now I was coming back with 2 boys aged 15 and 13, Yonatan and Daniel, and our daughters then, Nadina and Shira, aged 10 and 6. So coming back then, you're aware if you've got 2 boys who are 15 and 13, they're probably going to be combat soldiers. They both were a very sporty family and all, relatively fit and enjoy sport. And so to me, I thought they would both be combat soldiers. But I have to be honest, even when they both became combat soldiers, both became commanders, officers, signed on in the army, I don't think we really contemplated that we would, God forbid, be in such a situation.
I now have 3 soldiers in the army. They're all still in training, so it very much is like summer camp in a lot of ways. There's no real immediate danger on the horizon for them. But I have to say, when we went to the oath swearing ceremony of my daughter, who's a fighter as well, and there's the line at the end of the oath, and even with my life, even give up my life. And of course, hearing it in post-October 7th ears, it resonates so differently. How did you feel? Can you remember when you were at this similar ceremony? One of your sons is a paratrooper, correct? So that would have been at the Western Wall. Your son, Daniel, where was his oath taking?
Yonatan's was at the West, at the Kotel. Daniel's, I think, was during Corona. So I actually don't know where it took place.
On Zoom, of course.
On Zoom, yeah. I think, was it at Bislach at their base or at Shizafon? I actually don't know. It was on Corona. But the ceremony that I was at of his was at Latrun when they finished commander's course, Kurs Matakim, where he was actually blessed to be the outstanding, the Chayal Mitzdayan of his Pluga. which was actually the first time I really realized that he was taking the army very seriously, because he was really pushing himself to be as good as he could be. So I don't think, you hear those words, but again, they're not that's not where your head is, And I think that you mentioned that your children are in courses. That's where we want our kids to be in the army, in courses. And our son, Yonatan, on October 7th, was actually a Mempei, a company commander in the paratroopers of new recruits. So we pretty much thought we had 6 to 8 months of his role there, that he's in a course. But he actually fought on the day. He was injured on the day, because anyone and everyone who could go fought. So I don't think those seminal moments of hearing the oath it didn't take my imagination anywhere, because, you're not thinking that, you're proud, you're there, you're a parent, and it's such an auspicious occasion, and you're really proud to see your children, pledging allegiance to the state and having the zchut of being able to defend the state. But obviously, post Simchat Torah, I think all those words have a very different meaning for all of us indeed.
When I was at the oath-taking ceremony recently for my daughters in Ashdod, I looked around the auditorium and I just saw Am Yisrael. And it was Jews, of course, but also Druze and Bedouin, and everyone was there. And after October 7th, in which you experienced terrible loss, you didn't know quite how terrible just yet. Did you feel, in a way, I don't know how to put it, but perhaps even more Israeli than you were after having chosen to live here twice?
Yeah, for sure. I'll just tell you one small example of that, is that I daven, I pray the Nusach of Ashkenaz, which is, from Ashkenaz. But really the custom in Israel for many Ashkenazim is to daven Nusach Sfarad, meaning not as Sephardim, just it seems to be the Nusach of the land of Israel. And unfortunately, now that I'm saying Kaddish and davening in front of the Amud, I feel like I want to now daven Nusach Sfarad. I'm more Israeli than I was before October 7th. And there's no doubt when you have a son who's, I'm just feeling a bit emotional at the moment, when you have a son who's given his life for the country, and we're waiting for his body to be interned, but we do have his uniform with blood in it, which was buried. So when you've got a Tzion Kever in the land, and the person who you care about most, amongst obviously my immediate family, as it says in the end of the book of Dvarim, v'chiper admato amo, v'niketi damam lo niketi, when blood falls and you're part of the land, literally, you're very much more part of it. So there's no question about it that we do feel more Israeli. We know that our sages say Eretz Yisrael niknet b'yisurim, that the land of Israel is acquired through challenge and suffering. I was always hoping that making Aliyah twice was the challenge, and we came here with kids from the age of 6 to 15, which is, it's for everyone. It's a challenge to immigrate and in Israel we had a wonderful Aliyah Sachakol, but there's no doubt, post this your destiny is intertwined with the destiny of the land. And having our first Yom HaZikaron, I've been, as a person involved in Jewish leadership, I've been involved in many Yom HaZikaron ceremonies and in South Africa and in Israel, and preparing them for communities around the world. And but when you are a participant on the other side of this, as one of the mishpachot shekulot, the bereaved families, it's really it's a different experience. And I think few things make you feel more Israeli than being at Har Herzl on Yom HaZikaron. Even just to see it, when I went to Yom HaZikaron for the first time on Har Herzl as a participant, bringing a group from South Africa, I was so taken, as a community rabbi in South Africa. I'd performed many, probably hundreds of funerals and unveilings. I'd also been at funerals of people where tens of thousands and sometimes more in Israel had attended. But I'd never been to a cemetery where around every grave there was a family. That was the first time, I'll never forget, when I saw that scene, that image in my mind, the top of Mount Herzl, and just looking down at this endless amount of graves, and it's almost at every grave a chayal standing guard, and almost around every grave a family. I think I felt for the first time, at that point, I felt Am Yisrael grieving. I just felt that this was the nation grieving. But then obviously when we were part of it, this last Yom HaZikaron, it's hard not to feel with such pain so much part of the destiny of the land and the country. The fact that he's also a chayal, the fact that he's an oleh, the fact that he's a soldier, the fact that he's an officer, the fact that he fought bravely for 2.25 hours and gave his life on arguably the most fateful day in Israel's history, imbues it with incredible meaning, where you feel, as you know, the bracha, the blessing of comfort, we say, Hamakom Yinachem Otcha B'toch Sha'ar Yerushalayim, that Hashem should comfort one amongst the other mourners of Zion and Yerushalayim, and somehow all individual mourning is wrapped up with somehow the mourning of Zion and Jerusalem, a collective mourning, but here you literally feel it. So I definitely do feel, I feel that I want to daven Nusach Sfarad. I'm davening it now anyway because I'm leading the davening. I feel like I want to wear in my tzitzit techelet. I've been thinking for a long time about wearing it. It's the colors of, as we know, what the Torah originally intended for there to be a patil techelet, the sort of the turquoise blue thread. It's the colors of the flag of Israel, which was taken from the blue and white of the tzitzit. So that's where my head is. I'm feeling more Israeli. I definitely am.
Israelis are notoriously an argumentative people.
Yeah, we're outstanding at that. And Jews, we're outstanding at that. Yeah.
And even within those who are bereaved or those whose children were taken hostage, there are many different ideologies that are coming through, different camps, even one could say. And the mainstream Families Forum is pressing always for a deal to get the hostages home, whereas there are other voices, such as the Tikva Forum, which talks more about the collective obligation for the entire country and not the individual pain and suffering of the family and the hostage in Gaza. I wonder if you align yourself with either of these camps.
That's a good question. I've been part of both from the beginning, and I felt, I wouldn't say I'm aligned with both and aligned with neither. I think the main thing I'm aligned with from the word go is trying to get our son back. And I realized early on that as a family of a male soldier, our son and officer is probably right at the back of the line. And therefore, after about 3 months, the penny dropped. I would say Nachal Oz, but I don't know if people know what that means anymore. The penny dropped, where I realized that whether there will or won't be a deal, our son is unlikely to be part of it. And therefore, the best thing I can do is less campaigning for a deal or not, because even if I campaign for a deal, he won't be part of it. And therefore, and what's the most important thing we can do? To gather together all the families of the male soldiers, which is what we did, and together campaign together. And therefore, the line I could always take and I felt comfortable with, I would say, I'm not getting into whether there should or shouldn't be a deal and what the price should be. I don't want to say the luxury. I have the pain of knowing that whatever the price will or won't be, my son's probably not going to be part of it. Therefore, our campaigning as the parents of the soldiers is, and we could go to every party with us saying, I'm not, especially some of the more right-wing parties, we're not here to get into a debate of what the price should or shouldn't be, but we are saying whatever, there will be a deal, as there was the first time round. At some point there will be. We are begging, pleading, campaigning that the soldiers should be part of it. And that for me was the thing. And that for us, I felt was a unifying thing amongst the families of the soldiers, because that's the position I was in. I spoke at Hostage Square on a Motzei Shabbat with my daughter. Unfortunately, it was the Shabbat, the Motzei Shabbat before we heard about our son, 24 hours later. And I felt that especially over time, the Hostage Forum was really campaigning for all of us. And therefore, I felt comfortable. yes, there are times that, things can be politicized, but that's the nature. What does the word politicizing mean? Divisive. As you say, we're a divided people, and that's a healthy thing. But I felt I didn't want the fate of our son to be part of, let's say, a campaign this way or that way. I felt for me, both sides have got an element of the truth. And for me, the most important thing is to get our son back. And he's a soldier. And therefore, I had the luxury is not the right word, but I had the context of having to just focus with the families of the soldiers. And for me, that was always the line, There's probably going to be a deal. And whatever the deal should be, don't forget about the soldiers. And therefore, we were campaigning that when there was going to be hopefully a deal a number of months ago, which we were hoping and praying for by the time that Ramadan was supposed to come, to say that even if it's in stages, we understand it's unlikely that the male soldiers are going to be at the front of the line. But there should be a deal, at least contextually, about all of them. And in every stage, at least information about them. One of the hardest things was not knowing. I was campaigning for months. Our son also has a foreign citizenship. We're South African, and even though the South African government hasn't been particularly supportive of Israel, to say the least.
Very good understatement.
Yeah. It's causing Israel immeasurable damage, but they do have an open line with Hamas. And we know that there are, of the hostages, 20 foreign citizenship. So every parent will do whatever they can, whatever channel, and that's what. So what I've been focusing on is that. And I was also focused on just getting information. When I realized it's unlikely that it's going to get let out, at least can we know what's going on? So I felt I was able to operate in a way that not having to say I'm with this one or with that one, but saying both have a point, and let me make a difference wherever I can, particularly because the main focus is trying to get our son back. And either way, we're going to have to campaign hard for that. So that's and I think the Hostage Forum has done amazing things, and I'm often there, and I'm up in Hostage Square. And I think the Tikva Forum is also speaking about a certain, overall collective responsibility. And for me, I'm trying to get them both to work together and not have to get into the corner of, on that particular point, I agree more here or there. Just trying everything to get our children back.
You're talking about how the male soldiers would be at the back of the line, but one could assume that the female soldiers may be even more precious to Hamas.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, it's interesting. Initially, when we were campaigning, the reason why we campaign as male soldiers without the females is because the army and the parents, I think, of the female soldiers wanted to keep things separately. And in the beginning, I wasn't sure. When we liaised with certain high-ranking officials, it wasn't clear to me if the female soldiers would be behind the men or not. But over time, it seemed that Hamas had agreed to see the female soldiers as females. And therefore, if you recall, a couple of months ago, there was a lot of talk about all the women coming out, including the soldiers. And I think that was a tremendous achievement. And very happy, because anyone who comes out should come out. So to me, over time, it started becoming clear that there was a campaign to see the female soldiers as females. Now, even if we campaign to see the male soldiers as men, it still puts them at the back of the line, because I think the ones they spoke of were the elderly or those who had been injured. Now, our son was injured. So we campaigned very hard for him specifically. He was definitely injured. After a number of weeks, we got evidence of the fact that he was injured, blood in and around the tank. So what we're campaigning as soldiers, men who are injured. But I definitely felt, I must say, that being a male soldier officer, not a lot of officers didn't really put us in a very strong position, and therefore we campaigned very, very hard as parents of the soldiers.
Many people have written to me over the course of the several months due to our podcasts, and they ask me, how is it at all possible that the government of Israel is negotiating with Hamas without even knowing which people are alive or dead? And I'm sure this question came up several times in your conversations with leadership. Did it?
Absolutely. The challenge is, and this has been the harsh reality, it takes two to tango. I had no doubt that Israel would do everything to get our son out. My doubt wasn't there. My doubt was with Hamas's desire to let them out. Now, the one thing I have seen, Amanda, which is really very painful, is that Hamas have become so brutally good, in inverted commas, at bartering in human life, that they don't give one iota of information. I'm not aware of any family who's received any information initiated by Hamas, unless Hamas have want to release videos in order to do psychological warfare on their terms. And when I realized that the chances of getting Daniel out, in any deal where, he would be at the back of the line, for months, all I was campaigning behind the scenes as well, which, I don't want to give, information here, but I tried everything possible, and I traveled to countries I never thought I would. Or just for one thing, information. Can we get unequivocal information? If it is that, God forbid, he's passed away, if we know that, and we know it for sure, then at least we can deal with that, not be in this limbo situation. But they are so brutal, and the psychological warfare is so heightened. They give absolutely nothing, and they've learned. I spoke to somebody who was high previously in the Mossad, and he said, boy, have they learned that you don't give everything comes at a price, even the smallest piece of information. That's very harsh, very hard.
Again, not to be indelicate, but are you not angry with the government of Israel? Are you not angry with so many forces for this situation that your son was thrust into, and for the situation of uncertainty that you lived for 163 days?
I'm not angry. I don't know why I'm not. Like, if you'd asked me before if I would go through this, would I be angry? I might have thought I would have been. I don't know why I'm not. I'm not angry. The problem is that once you turn on the anger and the criticism, boy, oh boy, there's a long list. I could be angry at God as a believing person, which I'm not. I could be angry at the army and leadership, who I can tell you, my son Daniel always said, Dad, there will be a war. And when that war comes, I'm going to use to say in Hebrew, there's Yom Hapkudah Bo Yavo. The day of reckoning will come, and I and my tzevit will be ready. But he always thought it was going to be in the north. He was always preparing for a war with Hezbollah, because that's what the army thought. On that day, they were totally unprepared for that in every possible way. So I could be angry with the army. I could be angry with the government. I could be angry with my own ideology of Zionism. But what does it help? I think anger is a healthy emotion. It's got healthy, but it shows that you care about something. You care, but it's also very destructive. And I say just speak very much about the challenge of anger, where it really can be very debilitating and very self-destructive. Probably the two qualities that I say just are the most destructive are arrogance and anger. So I'm grateful that I don't feel angry, because I think if you operate from a place of anger and criticism, it's a bottomless pit. And I think this also connects to something else that I feel very strongly about, is that there's been so much anger and criticism in Israel for so long that everybody's absolutely convinced who's to blame. I always jokingly say we don't need a national inquiry, because we can all write the national inquiry. I can tell you who's going to say Bibi's to blame, who's going to say Bibi's not to blame, who's going to say the government's to blame, who's going to say the army's to blame. And we can almost write it now, because it's all based on who we think in the first place is. Now, I think there should be a national inquiry, and please God, it'll be something totally independent, and there has to be responsibility. But I feel for me to operate from a place of anger is going to be destructive for me. It's not going to help to bring my son back. And I actually do believe in my heart of hearts that it's exactly what we don't need in Israel now, because we all are so upset, so angry, so critical, so threatened by so many different people. And I think there's so much pain now to go along with it, and so much suffering. And I really believe that we really need healing. That's what we need. So I'm grateful that I don't feel that. And I think if I did feel that, that's totally acceptable. And those who do feel it, I certainly don't feel anything negative towards them at all. I totally feel, when people have questioned me and they said, hang on, when you see some of the families behaving in a certain way, what I feel, I said, I totally understand them. No one would ever want to be in their position. Any child, any parent should do anything they can to bring their child back, and you can certainly never judge anyone. So I don't feel I'm behaving better necessarily than anyone else. I'm grateful that I don't feel that, because I don't think it's healthy. It's understandable but I don't think it's productive and healthy under the current circumstances.
You were notified of Daniel's death in March, and did you accept it immediately? You don't have a body. You don't have proof in a way. How real did it seem to you, this announcement?
I'll tell you, as a rabbi and a person who's, familiar with certain texts, I was always very troubled by Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, our fathers, over 20 years concern for Joseph, his son, who he was told, Taruf Taraf Yosef, that his son Joseph was killed, but he never had evidence, and all he had was his coat with blood. And therefore our sages say that he was always troubled. When he stood in front of Pharaoh, he said, my days are few and bad, and how can one of our fathers, we're such a positive people, say that his days were bad? Well, when you've gone 20 years without proof of your son's body, it's hard to feel otherwise. But I didn't feel that. The reason I didn't feel it, as opposed to Yaakov, who only got his brothers presenting a Technicolor dream coat with some blood, when representatives of this army are sitting with you, and the chief rabbinate of the army and the chief rabbi also sat with us, and basically said the following after all of my questions. Obviously, I asked a lot of questions. When the answer is, Doron, we have video evidence. He's on the back of a bike in Sajaya, which we've seen from a number of angles. The evidence has been seen by 3 teams, a team of doctors, a team of Shabak, and a team of military intelligence, and all 3 independently ascertain that the footage is real, genuine. B, person in the footage is deceased, and he's your son. And if you want to, you can see the video, which we chose not to. That's not how I'd like to have an image of my son. And I asked the chief, and then it gets brought to the chief rabbi of the army, and they sit with the Beth Din and then make the decision. And I said to him a number of times, Rabbi Krem, is this 100%? He said, Doron, it's 100%. You can see the video. I don't advise you seeing it, but you can. It's 100%. So I don't have any doubts. Now and then I've got a fleeting thought, maybe one day he'll walk in, but it's not a real thought. And I don't have any doubt that that is the situation, as opposed to Yaakov Avinu. He didn't have a video, and he didn't have 3 independent teams. He just had a dream coat, and even the brothers said they didn't know what happened to him. So it's different. So I don't have any doubt.
You have 3 other children. One was injured and got married on October 19th, I believe? 17th. Yeah. That's remarkable in itself. And of course, that was still why you were living under the cloud of uncertainty. How are they?
I think, Sachakol, all in all, we're doing well as a family. Firstly, we know what we know now. We know that he's deceased. I don't want to say in some ways it's easier. There's nothing easy about dealing with this. But it's very different from, I think my wife captured it really well. She said, at the end of the Shiva, I say, Shel, how are you feeling? And she said, in what world do I live that I feel a certain amount of relief? Not that he's passed away, God forbid, but that I don't have to worry about him. I never had to worry about him. He didn't suffer. He's not suffering, and he won't suffer. And I can say that going through 163 days of, on the one hand, hope that Daniel's alive, and on the other hand, fear of what he's going through and whether, if and when you'll see him, and living alongside my wife as a mother to see what she was going through. I've personally never felt such pain and suffering. And although we have the rest of our lives to come to terms with his loss, I was just sitting outside the building, Washington 4, and just tears in my eyes. You can't hold it back when it comes. And we have a lifetime to deal with that loss. But somehow it seems more, I don't know what the right word is. I know the word is manageable, meaning this is what happens, unfortunately. I mean, it's totally unnatural that a person buries a child, but there are 1,500 families which have buried children, and there are 25,000 graves. And it's something which shouldn't happen, but it's something which happens, and people get through it. We're not the first, we won't be the last. We hope we're the last, but we're certainly not the first. But who has a son who's a captive in Gaza? I mean, it's Gilad Shalit. I mean, one person who has children who are captive in Gaza. And that's something which is just totally outlandish. And I think the angst, anxiety, and worry was just something which, you don't know when it's going to end. So at least here, he's passed away. And I think we as a family you're dealing with what you know. Yes, we still got to bring his body back. I just will say for me, I didn't feel the sense of relief that my wife felt. By the way, she didn't feel the relief immediately. It's just obviously immediately we were absolutely shattered and broken. But then when things quietened down, I don't have to worry about him. He's not suffering. There was a certain relief in that because of what we had been through before. We don't feel that way today. But the truth is I never felt that because for me, I was trying to channel all my concern for Daniel into activism. So every time I felt anxious, I said, okay, I'm going to choose not to feel anxious and to direct the anxiety towards doing. And therefore, I was the one running around and doing all of these things. Once I heard he had passed away, I found so hard, there's a finality. And now there's nothing I can do. Yes, there's what I can do to bring his body back, but we bring a body back for burial. It's not the same as bringing him back alive. At least for me, it isn't. Yes, I'm active and I'm all the time going to meetings, but it's different. And that I found very difficult. But I think as a family, we're grieving. We're closer as a family. We spend a lot more time together. Also with my parents, I have, my parents are alive and live in Israel, thank God. And it's been very tough for them to lose a grandchild. But I think it has, in all of this pain, brought us all closer together. I'm by nature a very sort of busy person, and I'm actually, for the first time in a while, really trying to prioritize the important over the urgent. We would get together once a week as a family with my parents, and which we never did before. I'm trying to prioritize different things now. So it's also, I think it's brought us closer. And we'll be doing okay. Each one in their own way, but we're doing okay.
At the outset, we said that we will speak about Jewish identity and Zionism. And I think we did throughout our conversation. But I think one last question would be for you. Would you still recommend to people in South Africa or Jews from throughout the world to come to Israel, knowing that this is a possibility for them as well? This fate could be theirs too.
I think in today's day and age, where is safe for Jews? Where is safe? I remember, I'll just tell you a story which highlighted this for me when we made Aliyah in 2014 from South Africa, which was not necessarily the safest place in the world. For Jews, it's actually been good, but the crime rates in general, it wasn't anti-Semitism, it was just crime in general. And I remember the second night we were in Israel, we were in our air raid shelter, and we're getting rockets from Gaza. And I remember walking in to my daughter, Adina, she was 10 at the time, her room, a couple of days after we made Aliyah, and I see her staring at the ceiling, and I say, Din, is everything okay? She said, Dad, I got 2 questions for you. Wasn't South Africa supposed to be the dangerous country and Israel the safer country? And why are people trying to kill a 10-year-old girl in her bed? Like, what did we do? So the first question, I had a good answer for her. I said to her, Din, we didn't leave South Africa because it was dangerous, and we didn't come to Israel because it's safe. I do believe, and I still believe, the safest place for the Jewish people is in Israel. Yes, it's true for those 8 hours, Otef Aza was the most dangerous place for Jews anywhere on earth since the Shoah. But since then, and before then, I really do believe that it's the safest place for Jews. But we didn't come here because we felt it's safe for Jews, even though I do think we came here because it connects on the deepest level to where we feel we should be. I think we have seen post-October 7th and Simchat Torah, we're safe for Jews. I actually met a family making Aliyah on a pilot tour yesterday, and they said they're coming from a particular country that we might think is safe for Jews, and they said they are making Aliyah because they just feel to see the marches going on and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people in their city. They said, in Israel, we're with our own, we're protected, we've got an army. It just doesn't feel safe. So I think it's important that what I said to them is, don't come to Israel because you think it's safe. I believe it is safe. Come to Israel because you think it's the right thing for you and your family. And if you think it's the right thing for you and your family, the timing is right, That's great. I shudder to think, Amanda, what would have been had my wife and I not made Aliyah for the right reasons, had we not been 100% on the same page, had my wife and I not been 100% on the same page. It's so hard to lose a child, but if one side feels the other one pushed them into something or they didn't really want to, I can't even go there. So I'm blessed that we were 100% on the same page. So I would say to people, absolutely, but make Aliyah for the right reasons. I believe it's the safest place for Jews, and I believe it's the place, more importantly, that Jews should be. But it has to be right, and the timing has to be right.
Doron, thank you so much for sharing everything.
It's a pleasure. It's a pity about the circumstances, but I do believe that, if I may just say a final line, I do believe we will come out of this a lot stronger as a people. The suffering of this generation pales into comparison of how much our forebears have suffered, the Shoah, the pogroms, the massacres. We're blessed that we have a state of Israel and the ability to defend ourselves. I'll just end with my son saying, Daniel, we found his diary. It came back from Nachal Oz, from the base. And in his diary, he wrote, I didn't know he had this diary, he started keeping it after he became an officer when he had to really think about leadership and his soldiers. And he writes 5 points about things that he thinks about every night before he goes to sleep. And the first one, he says, Lama ani kan, why am I here? As a soldier and officer. And he says, having been to Poland for the first time in grade 11, first and only time, and seeing the price we paid for not having the ability to defend ourselves, and now we do, he said, it's my role to defend my family and country. And then he ended up with 5 Hebrew words, which become very, inspirational for us. He said, Im lo ani azmi, if not me, then who? And we have the zchut of having a state of Israel. If not us, then who? The ability to defend it and to defend Jewish destiny. And as painful and harrowing and difficult, and we have the whole of our lives to deal with the price we have paid, we hope and pray there'll be no further price for our family and for all families. And ultimately, it's a privilege to live in an era of a state of Israel and to do all we can to defend the future of Jewish destiny.
Amen. Thanks for listening to What Matters Now. Please check out another installment next week. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until next week, Shalom.